What is up, my bodyweight warriors, and welcome back to another video. Today I want to share with you my overhead shoulder mobility routine. As you know, overhead mobility is not my strong point. In fact, it's something I've been struggling with throughout my training. However, over the past few weeks, because I have been focusing more on mobility because I can't train due to my golfer's elbow, I've seen some really good progress with this routine. So I thought it was about time to share it with you. Done right, this routine should only take about 15 minutes. However, if you have particular restrictions in any of the exercises that I recommend, then I recommend you simply perform an additional set of that exercise. This might bump it up to 20 minutes, but done 2 to 3 times a week, you should see some good progress in your overhead mobility. All you're going to need for the shoulder mobility routine is a couple of resistance bands, a foam roller or a lacrosse ball, and then yourself. Before I did this routine, I personally tested my shoulder mobility just to do kind of a before and after comparison, how different the range of motion that I could achieve was. If you want to do this routine at home, I highly recommend it. It's a nice way of quantifying. All you're going to do is stand about 30 centimeters away from the wall. You're then going to lean back into the wall with your hips, press your lower back into the wall, and simply raise your arms overhead in shoulder flexion. The most important aspect of this exercise is not letting your lower back lose connection with the wall, because that means you're simply compensating for the lack of overhead mobility by flexing your lumbar spine. As you can see, I can easily get my hands overhead touching the wall if I flex my lumbar spine. If I try to keep it neutral, then I'm actually quite a way off. And then just for comparison, here is the same test and the same position that I was following the session. So as you can see, there was actually maybe like 10 to 15 centimeters of difference in range of motion. Anyway, let's jump into the routine. So jumping into the first exercise, we're going to start with some soft tissue work. Fitness FAQs or Daniel Vadnal did a really good video recently explaining when and how you should do foam rolling. So I'll link to that in the description down below. But essentially it can be used prior to training to get a little bit more range of motion, which is why we're using it here. You might want to choose to foam roll, for example, your lats or your triceps. Or for me personally, I like to grab a lacrosse ball and really go in on my posterior delt, because that is something that's particularly tight in my case. For the soft tissue work, we're going to simply spend 2 minutes on whatever area we're deciding to do. So if you're doing your lats, you want to spend 2 minutes on your left hand side and 2 minutes on your right hand side. I would just choose maybe 1 or 2 parts to mobilize, figure out what your particular restriction is, and then focus on that area. As I said, mine is the posterior delt. So after we've done some soft tissue work, it's time to jump into some actual movements. We're going to start off this routine with a band exercise that I got from YURI'S. This band exercise is also in my full body mobility routine because I find it's a really good movement for moving the shoulder through a whole range of motion, going from internal to external rotation, going from extension to flexion. It just kind of gets everything into one movement. I personally like to use this exercise as more of a warm-up into the shoulder mobility routine, and then from this movement you can kind of figure out what parts are tight for you today and what parts you might want to spend more time working. We're going to perform this exercise for 10 reps per side. When we're performing the exercise, we want to try and be controlling the movement through our shoulder and not getting overly armsy with the movement. Next, we're going to focus on shoulder extension, and in particular we're going to be looking at working that pec minor, pec major, anterior deltoid. For this, we're going to grab a somewhat heavy resistance band, something around medium resistance you want to use, but find what you feel is appropriate. You're going to strap it to a bar, probably over head height, wrap your wrist into the strap, and then step out so it's under a little bit of tension. We're then going to put our arm into full external rotation, reaching as far back as we can and twisting that palm to face the sky. From there, we're going to initiate the movement with our shoulder, maintaining a straight arm. We're going to move from fully externally rotated to fully internally rotated of the shoulder. And then we're simply going to reverse that for 1 rep. You're going to perform this exercise for 10 reps per side. Moving in and out of external and internal rotation. I find this one's really great at actually getting a whole bunch of musculature around that shoulder capsule. Rather than doing several individual stretches to get those muscles, this one kind of targets all of them in one exercise. Next, we're going to work some shoulder extension. In my full body mobility routine, I recommended the table pose, and we're essentially going to be replicating that position, but we're going to be doing it in an upright position. You simply want to grab a horizontal surface that you can grab a hold of with your hands, or a barbell. You're going to place your hands at an appropriate width for your particular mobility. The wider you go, the easier it's generally going to be. The closer you put your hands together, the harder this position is going to be. You're going to put them on the bar behind you, and then you're simply going to take a step forward, or you're going to lean into the stretch and really extend those shoulders. I'm personally doing it here in a kneeling position with the bar at about chest height, and this is the position that I find personally most effective when it comes to doing this stretch. Doing a barbell standing up or doing it on a kitchen side or something will do absolutely fine. It's really important when you're doing the stretch that you want to be actively pushing away from the surface you're stretching with your hands, and therefore retracting your shoulder blades, bringing your shoulders together, sticking your chest up and deepening into the stretch. We're going to hold this position for 30 seconds. Next, we move on to some shoulder flexion, and we're going to go with an old favorite here, and that is the butcher's block. All you're going to need for this is a surface again to lean on. You can also do this on the floor. You're going to need a stick just to fix your hands in the right position. And then from there, we're simply going to grab the bar a little bit outside of shoulder width, place our elbows a little bit closer than our hands. This is going to force external rotation of the shoulders. We're going to rest our elbows onto a surface, sit back, and then drop down into the stretch. This stretch is going to be very intense for the tricep and the lat, and also the insertion point between the two, and also we're forcing that external rotation, so it's going to be quite an intense stretch. One important thing when doing this exercise, you don't want to have any arching in that lumbar spine. That's going to decrease how effective this stretch is on our lats and tricep. To make sure you're doing the stretch properly, you want to make sure you maintain a somewhat hollowed body, or at least a neutral spine throughout this exercise. When we're in this position, just like the stretch before, we want to be making it active. We want to be actively pushing our chest to the ground and really deepening that stretch. We can either hold this position for 30 seconds, or we can perform reps for 10 reps with a 10-second hold on that last rep. The final stretch that we're going to be performing in today's routine is a hanging cobra. This one is actually from Emmett Lewis, and it's one of my personal favorites when it comes to opening up. Because it's a relatively non-specific stretch, it just kind of stretches out the whole anterior side and of your body, and really gets a nice deep stretch wherever you have restrictions. This exercise is actually a complex of 3 different positions. We're going to have the standard neutral position where you're just simply facing forward. Then we're going to have a position where you're rotated 90 degrees to the right hand side, and a position where you're rotated 90 degrees to the left hand side. The ones where you're rotated are going to be basically a stretch across your entire side, and it's going to be quite intense on the lats and the obliques. When you're going on the more neutral position, you're going to be getting stretched through your lats, through your pecs, also through your abs. Kind of, it's more of a general anterior stretch. To do this exercise, you're simply going to grab a couple of rings or grab a bar, and that bar wants to be about chest height. You're then simply going to grab it and then lower yourself down into that hanging cobra position. You're going to hold this position for 30 seconds. Again, if you want to add an active nature to it, you can try to basically push away from the rings and try and deepen into the stretch. After we've held that position for 30 seconds, you can take a quick break, and we're simply going to flip ourselves onto a side position, and again we're going to hold that for 30 seconds. We're going to be trying to push that shoulder up and deepen into the stretch, and then after that 30 seconds is up, a little rest, and we're going to simply repeat on the other side. The reason I like this stretch so much is that it kind of targets wherever is tight. I notice there's a difference between, on my right hand side, I feel it more in my lower back / obliques, and then when I get to my left hand side, I feel it pretty damn intensely in my lat. So it's nice that it's quite a general stretch, and it will simply find your imbalances for you. Finally, that is the stretching done. We're going to move into 2 exercises that can help restore better movement patterns. Now that we we've built that range of motion through the stretches that we've done on this exercise, we want to make sure we can use that range of motion. The first is a scapular wall slide. This is going to be useful for improving our upward rotation of our scapula and getting into a better overhead position. It's also going to help engage our serratus anterior, which is again important muscles for the handstand, but also the front lever and the planche. So this can be used for an activator exercise before you do your main training as well. To do this exercise, you're simply going to need a wall. You're then going to place your forearms on the wall, and you want to have them a little bit closer than shoulder width. And then from there, we're going to protract our scapula, which means we're going to round our shoulders. And then we're simply going to slide our arms up and down the wall. It's important when performing this movement that we don't let our arms flare out to the side and ruin the actual upward rotation of the scapula. We want to make sure that we maintain a consistent distance between our arms and that the upward movement is coming from the upward rotation of our scapula. You're going to perform this exercise for 10 reps. I think you'll be surprised at how hard this exercise is, but it is actually a really great exercise for just improving that particular mind muscle connection. The final exercise we're going to do is some end range control. So the exercise that I was showing actually from Emmett Lewis, who is quite a big inspiration for a lot of the exercises used in today's video, and that is simply some overhead end range control. All you're going to do is grab a box similar to what you might have used for the butcher's block. You're going to kneel in front of it, extend your arms out fully and rest them onto the box, getting into that overhead position. In the same way as the butcher's block, we want to maintain a relatively neutral spine and avoid overarching in our lumbar spine, as this is just compensating for poor shoulder mobility. From here, we're going to simply raise one arm as high as we can in that end range of motion, and then we're going to hold this position for 10 seconds. We're then going to rest for 5 seconds, and then we're going to repeat that for an additional 2 reps to make it a 3 rep total of holding our arm just at that end range of motion that we can achieve. We're then going to swap sides and then repeat the same process on the other arm for 3 reps, 10 seconds active, 5 seconds rest. And that's it, guys. That is the shoulder routine. If you do this properly, it should only take about 15 minutes to complete. However, if you have any restrictions, as I said before, then you can spend an additional set doing any of these particular movements that you find are challenging. If you enjoyed this video, hit that thumbs up button. If you have any questions about this routine or any of the movements that I prescribe in this video, leave a comment in the comment section down below. I always reply. I'm there answering your questions. If you can't get hold of me in the comments, why not join the Facebook group and get some answers off everyone else who is also on this bodyweight journey and join the community. If you have a friend who is struggling with their shoulder mobility, then please share this video with them. But that has been it for today, guys. Have a strong week and peace.